welcome everyone. I'm Ryan Heckman, the CEO of Rallyday Partners, and this is the Founder's Journey podcast. We'll explore the heart and soul of great founders and their journey to build the company of their dreams. You will learn about new industries and business models while discovering how to apply the founder's mindset to your everyday work and life. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Founder's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Heckman, and I am joined by a VIP, at least for a day here at Rallyday, the CEO and founder of Elder Care, David Gilberg. David, welcome to Denver.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
It's kind of cool because when we started the visioning of what the Founder's Journey podcast would be, it was mostly like, oh my gosh, we have all these founders in our portfolio with these amazing stories. What if we could tell them to our broader community? We have since added a lot of different topics over the years, but always nice to come back to home in terms of sharing the rich, textured stories of the founders that we get to work with every day. David's business, Elder Care, just became part of the Rallyday portfolio in July of 25. David, just real quick, why don't you describe your business and how you came to be part of the Rallyday family, and then we'll kind of segue into kind of how you got here today.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you again. And Ryan, thank you for letting me fly in here for a number of reasons, but most of all, to be a part of this. This is awesome and exciting. As I mentioned to you, this is my first time ever on a podcast, so this is great. Elder Care Homecare is a concierge home healthcare business specializing in caregivers and nursing. For when anybody thinks of what we do, it's kind of that old, wholehearted thought process of what do seniors need, and it's that caregiver in the home. That's exactly what we're offering. But then we go even further and we provide that concierge level of service to even nursing care. So in the pandemic, many people saw that the most vulnerable population was underserved in a lot of the healthcare facilities. And the best part that we can offer now is not just caregiver services, but even more extensive, and have nursing care at home, where we can do everything from IV infusions, wound care, as the simple nursing stuff, but more importantly, all the way up to vents, trachs, and PEG tubes and things of that nature. So really exciting of type of services we offer. But more importantly, I think to your question is, how do we end up in the Rallyday family? And that's a fun story in my mind. About in 2024, after the pandemic was kind of subsiding, and we went through a lot of challenges helping seniors and figuring out how to navigate the challenging healthcare environment, we realized we needed a partner to help us continue to grow and scale. And the interesting part as an owner founder is we always think about growing and scaling in a business perspective. But from a healthcare perspective, it really comes down to how do we help more people? And with those in the most vulnerable population, there's a lot of people missing out on that healthcare need. And we were looking out and saying, we are struggling servicing as many people as possible to the best quality care we believed. And that's what kind of brought us to that point where we said we need a partner. And we went on our own journey to find that partner. And I think we were lucky enough to meet you guys, and you guys embodied everything that we thought of how to help us grow our team, how to bring better quality and higher services to senior citizens, and what type of people do you want to be spending time with? And you guys hit everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge compliment that you chose to work with us. And it's a big decision. I mean, we're going to be together for like 5 years, probably at least. And I can only imagine for you and your wife and family, what a pivotal moment this was for you all, and the trust that you've put in us. I think on our side of it, there was absolutely some divinity at play here. There's 4 managing partners at Rallyday, Mark, Nancy, Frank, and I. And when we met you, David, I'm not sure we've shared this with you, but all 4 of us had the need for home care for our parents. And so we knew very intimately and very vulnerably how hard that decision was to even, kind of decide that we couldn't do it alone, that we needed help, in the first case. And then, it's a very, for those of you who have not been through this, you type into your Google search or whatever, like care for my parents. I mean, it just, there's no search engine words for what you're looking for, which is the love and care of someone that is the most probably special thing in your life. And you just don't know how lonely that can feel, and how vulnerable you feel as a son or daughter, hiring someone to go into the home of your mom or dad or both and caring for them. So we had all gone through that together. And then when we met you, David, and you shared the story of you and your mom, we all said in unison, boy, I wish we would have known Elder Care, and I wish they operated in the state of Colorado, because it is just such a scary moment in time for everybody. And it really, I guess, helped us to attach ourselves to the work that you do, and maybe ask questions that were more informed and felt inspired to, support your future just a little bit more because of what we were going through personally. So in that respect, I would just set the table that this is not just an investment for Rally Day. This is us making an investment into, the broader society, and in terms of providing the capital to give the care that we wish we had when we were going through all this. And I think it would be a great time to share your origin story, because your mom has been a big part of that, and it's just a great story.
No, I appreciate that. It's funny because I don't, as many children don't, I don't thank my mother enough for everything she's done, just raising us in general, but then also for everything she's done for elder care. Yeah, a quick background to it. My mother launched what we called Elder Care Consulting maybe 30 years ago, and she had the vision of what we call today is called the geriatric care manager. When you think about anybody and everything in our lives, we have financial advisors, we have consultants for our business, you have so many people you can hire to help you. But when you get to become a senior citizen, you don't know what you're doing, like you just said. And you have 12 different medications, 7 different doctors, all these different ailments, and you don't know what you're doing and nobody to help you navigate. So she had the vision to be the daughter with knowledge. And so she became a consultant for senior citizens. And now it's an entire industry today called geriatric care managers. And she was one of what I would always say is the OG of the late 90s was one person. Nobody did this industry. She's going to assisted livings, hospitals, pitching this service, and just a sole woman starting her own company, entrepreneur, with sheer force. And she launched Elder Care Consulting and did a fantastic job just helping people. Uniquely, she had two special aspects to herself. One is she's a social worker and a nurse, both of which are very rare to have both, which gave her the clinical side from the nursing, but the social worker side is what, as I would say, is like that quarterback who navigates everything and problem solves. So when she was helping out while I was being raised and growing up, I've seen her build this company of elder care consulting and be a one woman army. But more importantly, I can't tell you how many times in high school I'd be driving in the car with her and she'd say, I have a 5 minute stop to make, check in on a patient. The next thing I know, 3.5 hours later, I'm still in the car. So that was how I was being raised. And I went in pursuit of career in finance. I began advising a couple of various different businesses. I began my career at GE Healthcare and then moved to Morgan Stanley. And I advised a deal in the Medicaid space at the time. And I looked at this and said, oh my God, what an amazing industry and business of helping people. And very quickly, I looked internally and I felt for myself, a career in finance, I wasn't really making a difference. I wasn't helping anybody. And the one person who I always knew who did so much for others and serviced others was my mother. And she then launched during this time frame, she launched a company called Elder Care Homecare, which was she had so many struggles as that consultant for families that she realized, hey, they need caregivers. Let me oversee them, and realized the services that exist today were pretty much non-existent. As you, Nancy, Mark, and everybody has really struggled with this caregiver side, she noticed that as well and said, why don't I provide the aids and do the consulting at the same time? Very quickly after she started providing caregivers, she goes, what did I do? I went from being a consultant, which I am the hardest worker, I'm a nurse, I'm a social worker, to now managing people. I don't even know compliance, management, all these other things. And because she was such a fantastic entrepreneur, she figured it out. But it was really on a small scale. So if she had 20 clients that were consultant, she'd help one or two with a caregiver. And it was what I'd like to call almost like a side hustle. And when I was advising a couple of companies in the Medicaid space, I looked at this and said, oh my God, there's such a need. I would love to take over Elder Care Home Care and relaunch it as a standalone company and use this amazing competitive advantage is my mother. She has all the knowledge in the world. And so I left Morgan Stanley and launched Elder Care Home Care as a standalone company. And she thought I was crazy. She thought, it's a very challenging industry, very challenging business. And I'd worked so hard working my way up in finance. But I believed in this and I believed we could really make a difference together. And that's how we started in 2017 and what's gotten us here today.
Yeah. So for those of you who are investment bankers out there, pretty high standard in terms of pivoting your life away from investment banking into maybe forming a partnership with your mom, which is pretty crazy. Take us back to the day. I think I asked you this early on when we met, but I'm just intrigued by you at your office. I'm assuming down in Manhattan somewhere at some Morgan Stanley building doing M&A. And when you like walked out of the building and maybe you had a box, like, or a bag or, I don't know, but I mean, take us to that moment because I think a lot of us who grow up in the finance industry have a romanticized version of the story that we dream about in terms of setting our sights on a different goal and perhaps one that is maybe more altruistic or more impact oriented. But none of us really have the guts to do it, and so it becomes just this dream, this notion, maybe something pulling on us that never gets fulfilled. You actually did it. So how did you get the courage? And then what were some of the insecurities or like second thoughts that were hanging over you when you walked out of the building? And maybe there wasn't a moment, but maybe take us to that like day zero.
Yeah, it's funny that you're bringing me back because, firstly, just as I think back to my investment banking days right now, I think such warm-hearted feelings that only happens after a decade of being out of investment banking, right? Nobody in the moment thinks, so I'm like, oh, wow, what great times I had then. But it wasn't great times most of the time. But it's interesting with most investment bankers to get to investment banking, most people, especially in interviews, are saying, this is my dear passion. And all I've ever wanted was to be an investment banker, and I'll do whatever it takes. And then you get the job and you work tirelessly to any time throughout the middle of the night, and you enjoy the work content, and you have to, otherwise you can't survive in that industry. But I think most people, once they make it a few years in investment banking, in the back of their mind, they start thinking they want to get out and do something more. They've just advised all these companies, they've done all this work, and in the back of their mind, everyone has dreams, and most of the time you just dream and then you don't do anything about it, and you always say, I should have done this and I should have done that, and nobody does anything. I was really fortunate or unfortunate during my time that once I had advised on this deal in Medicaid, I pretty much convinced myself that this was an amazing business opportunity and that I can make a real difference. So I believe probably for 2 to 3 months, I was building business cases, building models on the side while I was at work and asking pretty much anybody who would listen to me to review it with me, my office mate, another VP in the group, somebody else. And I think because of that, of over communication with other people in the group, I think they could tell I was starting to check out a little bit and I had other priorities. So by the time I was leaving, I think to them and to myself, this was almost a absolute that this was going to happen. Having said that, I think even more so is I don't know if it's my personality trait. Almost every person I spoke to told me this was the worst idea and what am I thinking? And it almost gave me, I'm one of those that kind of rebels. I must have been like in my childhood that, people tell you no, so, you do the opposite. It must have been something along those lines that every person I spoke to just said, you just paid all this money to go to business school. You spent all your career in finance. I lived in Milwaukee, Chicago, Brazil, Morgan Stanley. Like I've just been grinding away to try and get to this point, and I'm finally there. And then all of a sudden, I'm just going to leave and stop it all and start afresh. And
And
so,
with your mom,
and with my mom, and everyone's like, "What?"
right? This headline is horrible.
And I can tell you, there were times I'm thinking, "What are people saying about me?" I mean, he just couldn't cut it and had to go work with his mother, like in this obscure industry that like nobody wants to do. And the only person who actually believed in me at the time or believed in the thesis and everything was my father. And he had started his business many, many years ago. And my entire family, if they thought I wanted to be quote unquote entrepreneurial, my family's had an insurance business. And they said, okay, if you really want to leave and go sell insurance and go build a financial business that way. And he was the only one to say, no, I think you're passionate about this. You believe in this. And I actually think you will kill it with this. Your mother, my wife, is the best nurse I know, but she has no idea what she's doing from the business side. And this is all you've done. I think you take your shot. And I think because of that, I had one person in my corner who I trusted and believed in that helped. And on the other side, I felt like I just had this unnatural need to prove everybody else wrong. And those two things combined, I think, just gave me the drive to do it, to finally pull the Band-Aid off.
And I mean, I'm just, this is purely like for my selfish interest, but like, was there a day that you walked out of the office at Morgan Stanley?
There was the day that I was fortunate enough or unfortunate enough that at the end of the year during the bonus season, they had known that I'd been doing this. And they asked me point blank if I was planning to leave. And at the time, I hadn't decided to leave. I wasn't planning to leave. In my head, I was always going to try and launch this as a side hustle. And like we all know, it wouldn't have gone well. And I would have said to myself, thank God I didn't leave and ruin my life and go launch it. But once they had found out, it was almost kind of like a push out in a way. I had the option. I think once you and I might have talked about this once. I don't remember, but I think they asked me point blank, and in my head, I hadn't decided, but I didn't want to lie. And I knew if I left 2 or 3 months later to pursue this, and I'd lied in this moment, I'd burn every relationship I ever had. So in that moment, I said, yes, I'm looking to pursue other options. And right when I said it, I was almost regretful. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this right now. Like, is this really the moment? Like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready to do this. I needed 3 months. I need the money. This was part of my financing. But that was the moment, and that was it. Was end stop there. They couldn't have been more appreciative, and it was that's the day exactly that the box was carried out. And the nice part was I held my head high, and I was excited for the next journey. But I also was like, I don't know why I just did that. Like, what was I thinking?
Yeah, it's like they push the issue and then they pushed you out of the nest. And maybe you'll look back and say that was like the best thing that ever happened in terms of forcing that on you. But boy, I mean, I talk to so many people in our industry, which is pretty crummy, as we all know, in terms of just fulfillment, broadly speaking. And we all talk about it, but very few people do anything with it. So maybe one of the things that comes out of this podcast is an investment banker out there, regardless their age, says, you know what? Like, I'm pushing myself out the nest, and if David can do it, I can do it, and maybe other people will create, really cool companies from your inspiration. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, the time since. I don't know if you want to put it into chapters, David, but it might be helpful to talk about, again, another visual in my mind is you and your mom at the kitchen table the day after walking out of Morgan Stanley saying, okay, now what do we do? And so I'm curious about that. And then maybe in like 3 or 4 chapters, talk about how you got to where you are. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, the scale of this company, Elder Care, I even dare say company, let's call it an organization. But the scale of this is huge. I mean, like, how many people are we caring for today at Elder Care?
I'd say the number is probably around 600 patients today we're caring for today, and then we have maybe 2,000 employees total at this point.
And then you think about the sons and daughters or husbands or wives of those that are provided care. I mean, and you think about a typical hospital, and if they had 600 beds, that is a massive hospital. And so every day, elder care is a very large hospital system dispersed through the tri-state area of Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. And it's in the world of home health care, elder care is becoming a blue chip leader of the industry, but it all started somewhere. And we know in a lot of cases in your mom's heart, and then in her hands, and then yours. Maybe just founders journey this and just do the 3 or 4 chapters. What would be the title of chapter 1? And what were you focused on? And then do chapters 2 through 3 or 4 or whatever.
Oh, I love that. And to go back to your point is, we're really proud of this today. I think we have crossed the barrier of, I think we're going to provide over 1.5 million hours this year of service. So really exciting. But to your point of the founder's journey, and it's hard to, I almost want to break it up to 20 sections, right? But can't do that. So I think the first stage is starting out. And I don't want to use that word as, like you said, what's the title? It's not the most articulate words, but I think it's almost applicable, even better usage of starting out as the chapter summary, because at that point, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Everything is hard. Everything is a nightmare, and you second guess yourself at every stage. And anybody who's been a founder, started a company, everything is just so difficult. And I give such respect to anybody who tries to be an entrepreneur, even if it doesn't work out, because then you understand the journey to some extent. And just the idea of like making email addresses and websites and things like that all sounds so easy. Everything sounds easy. You see Facebook. I should have started that. I had an idea. Everything's so hard. And it's so crazy to think the challenges I had, even just with our email addresses a decade ago, that all of a sudden somebody else had the URL and then you did this and then you got to save it on GoDaddy. And it's just, it's a nightmare. So I'd say the first year to 2 years when you start out is you have the challenges of starting a business. That's number one, really hard. Two, you're trying to figure out your way of what the strategy is going to be. And although you have all these ideas and the business model and you have a business case and you've maybe had mentors and people, all of a sudden then you have to start and do it. And it's never how you drew it up. Nothing is the same. So again, the first year, the first 3 months, I didn't think I got my first client until 3 months in. And the way I can still remember the time I got my first client, and the story is so vivid that I walked into a pitch, cold calling a nursing home, sat in a waiting room for 2 hours, and finally the social worker came out and walked past me and said, "Oh, have you been waiting for me?" I was like, "Yes, but it's no problem." She goes, "All right, just come in. We'll talk for 5 minutes." And while we sat for 5 minutes, we spoke. She was about to kick me out, and three of her employees walked in complaining about some patient in some extremely challenging situation. And she just looks at me and goes, "This seems like a nightmare. Here, give him a shot." That was how I got my first client. That's not how I drew it up. I thought I'd have in Morgan Stanley this amazing business model with people knocking down my door, pitching these boardrooms and these businesses and families, and I'd have these massive clients. I never thought I'd spend 2 hours sitting in a waiting room from a social worker to people just complaining about a patient and then being like, "Good luck to you. Go for it." And so I'd say the first year or two is very much like that, as 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And to be honest, it's probably like 2 steps forward, 10 steps back in the first 2 years, but you get the gist in that regard. And then once we made it past the 2 years, I think we had proven concept. It wasn't a one man or me and my mother. I mean, I was the scheduler, the billing person, the finance person, the marketer, the salesperson, the scheduler, Nurse David, if I had to be, whatever it was. To after year two, I would say you start building a little infrastructure, right? We had an office manager, a scheduler, an HR person. We brought on a finance person 2 days a week. So you start doing a little delegation. And I think it's probably the size of this conference room was the size of our office, which in this stage, I would say is toddler stage in some regard. And chapter two is you can walk, you can kind of run, but it's definitely not good. It's not pretty. It's cute. It's very cute, right? When I look at my toddler running, it's cute. I would not say he's running a marathon anytime soon. And that's where I think the stage two is. You have 4 or 5 employees. You're a business, but you're really not a business. You're communicating every single thing somebody did in the office. I could hear them. So I'm still kind of pulling every string in some regard. Somebody says something on a phone I don't agree with, I can hop right in. I can jump into any problem and problem solve. So although I'm delegating, it's really not a full-on business. And I think this is where a lot of founders really struggle to get past that point. At that stage, I would say we were up to 6 employees operationally and maybe 50 to 100 employees externally.
And that even seems big to me.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
seems
like,
big and
0 to 50 or whatever. I mean,
exactly. And that's where I always use it because they're W-2 employees, but it's still variable. So they're out in the field. They're our caregivers out in the field and our nurses. But I think at that point I was at the precipice of, hey, do I run a small business or what do I need to do to scale? And I was really fortunate at the time. One of my closest friends had a startup that they sold, and I was discussing the same problem over drinks, as most of us are just venting.
what was the name of the friend?
Josh Milstein, and he
Shout
had
out to Josh.
yeah, exactly. Awesome guy. And he had just sold, he had a new mom's company. It was a technology platform. I would give a shout out to it, but unfortunately, I don't think it's around much anymore. But 8 years ago, it was to connect new moms who were trying to find things to do in random cities. And at that moment, he goes, "Actually, my business partner is kind of trying to figure out his next thing. I really think you should talk to him." And his business partner, who's now our chief business officer, Eric Mayer, had just moved down to Texas. And I was like, he lives in Texas now. He's in Austin. He's living the dream. You guys just sold. And you guys were in the new mom space. We're on the other spectrum. We're in elder care. Like, I don't know if that combines. And he was like, no, he's a great partner. And I think he could add a lot of value. As you guys are going on this next stage of the journey, I'm not trying to push you in any which way, but have a conversation. And so I didn't think anything of it. I think I waited a month or two and then reached out to Eric and was just like, hey, let's just catch up. Next time you're in New York, let's grab a beer. And that was probably the toddler stage of getting us to the next stage. Bringing on a partner who I could trust, who could help us scale into another location, who can help me industrialize some of the business. And that's when we launched in Manhattan. He had finally agreed to come on board to my crazy idea of my passionate project of how do we offer senior care to more people and how I think this entire industry really should be. And the challenge we were getting to at that point was our quality of care at that stage was the best in the industry. And I give all the credit to my mother. She's a nurse and a social worker. Our business model really catered to that model of she can do, or our nurses have to do both services, and would provide the highest level in consulting capacity for free to every family who hired us for caregiver services. And when I brought them on board and we started launching new locations, we quickly were realizing that's not as easily scalable option, that David's mom can't be replicated at every location. So thank God I had a trusted partner to do this. And I know many times in founders' journeys, when you bring on partners, it can go one of two ways. So I was in the lucky camp. And so in that chapter 3 with Eric and I'd say I would say we're a true business. Chapter 3 is becoming a real, not a child, that, a real size business that we can say, hey, what do we do next? And so that would be chapter 3, I think, was us trying to figure out how to scale our business and what's the business model we'll be proud of and what we want to do. And the biggest aspect that we not only noticed was how do we repeat my mother, but also in the healthcare industry as a whole is really just a challenge in and of itself. Healthcare has a mentality, unfortunately, of a burn and churn for their healthcare workers. Get what you need, grind it out, help people, and if it's at the behest of the healthcare workers' mental health or their quality of care, you just need to get the job done. That's healthcare, right? You go to a hospital, like they're so good, but they're really ironclad focused. And I almost looked at us like we're a startup. How do we build kind of what Rallyday's done to private equity? How do we offer this in a home healthcare business that people want to come here, they're excited, and the quality of care that they want to do and they can be passionate about to change. So that was in chapter 3. I think we started creating this entire business model around that thought process, and we were successful. It went well. And then I'd say chapter 4 is what's next? How do you take to the next stage? And I think Eric and I started struggling scaling, to be honest. Operationally, wherever we touched was gold, and the things we weren't touching was starting to struggle. And I joined an organization. Again, I think the one thing I've done really successfully is recognizing when I'm not enough, self-awareness into how do you fix these things? How do you get better? And I joined an organization which I highly suggest people to do is YPO. And during one of our sessions, my entire crowd, the group of people I was meeting with, mentioned to me that I need a COO. You need it. And as a founder, and this is my business, I don't want to spend the money at first. I was like, I don't know if I need it. I'll do this better than them. And can they jump in? Eric's been fantastic, but I don't know if we can get lightning doesn't strike twice. And fortunately, one of the gentlemen in my YPO actually let go of their chief of staff. They did a layoff and it just wasn't right. It wasn't because of performance. He was like, we had to do a layoff. And this guy's a rock star. Meet with him. I'm telling you, he can be helpful. So we actually were talking to this gentleman named Todd Abramson, and he was speaking to us to become a consultant for us. And at that point, that's what we were going to hire him for. We were going to say, we need some help, but we don't need too much help. So why don't we hire a consultant who can help us take it to the next level? And during those discussions, we quickly realized like there's so much work that we need to do that he's going to recommend. And I don't have time to do it. Eric doesn't have time to do it. And our leadership doesn't have time to do it. We need to bring him on full time. And that was the next stage when we got lucky with the third member of our C-suite, Todd Abramson. And he came in, and the most exciting part for him was he goes, I've never been to a company that has less meetings than you guys. And he goes, it's amazing. That's why you guys run so fast, so hard. You guys are so successful. That's what's helping you guys scale at 50 to 100% per year. But you guys never meet. You don't have a Monday morning meeting. You don't have anything. So that was the first thing that we realized, like, hey, we got to become a real company. And that was the third stage. And I think once we got to chapter 4, we're writing chapter 5 now with you guys, was we got it to a level where I think 2,000 employees were across 4 different states. We have 5 or 6 different offices. We did 2 acquisitions, but we did them well, but there's a lot of footfalls. How do we offer and scale this quality to as many people in more states and more regions than we could, and keep the culture of what elder care was from the beginning when it was just me and my mom, or there's 6 people sitting in a room this size? And I don't know how to do that. And I'd rather not have the pain points for 3 years figuring it out. I know we can learn, but I don't want to spend 3 years learning. How do we expedite that process and take to the next level? And that's where chapter 5 is being written with you guys.
That's really well said and well articulated. My observation about the industry is, having just gone through it as a consumer, is that the industry is kind of devolved into a lead generation industry where, if you type in, I need home care for my parent, and there's a list of phone numbers on the first page of Google. I would say 90% of those phone numbers are lead aggregators who then sell me and my needs for my family to some agency who pays top dollar. My experience was filling in the form very naively and getting about a dozen calls within an hour. And it was always, I mean, it was kind of varying degrees of quality, but let's just say at best, it felt like an overseas call center, boiler room type person on the other end who said, do you need a caregiver for your mom or dad? And it just made me feel the opposite of what I wanted to feel. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but I felt that my noble desire for a higher quality of care for my father in this case was being attacked by, capitalism, for lack of a better word, and kind of a very transactional approach. What I never heard in that journey was, "Hi, I'm David Gilberg. I work with my mom, Lauren, and we do two things really well. We will provide the best medical care to your loved one, and we have the EQ and social working mindset of caring for the whole family." Because the little known truth in home healthcare is that for every one patient, there's a family around them that is really struggling with balancing life and kind of the not shame, but like this feeling of defeat that I couldn't care for my dad. And I've got to hire someone to do that in his home, at least in my case, and others to varying degrees. And that has been missing from this industry for some time, despite the fact that this industry is growing like crazy. And our country needs somebody in this country to emerge as a white knight of sorts. And we believe at Rallyday that elder care can be that white knight, that guardian angel that we don't have words yet to describe what it is we want to hear. But I will tell you, David, I heard nothing close to the story you just told. How are you working with our firm? And I know you guys have spent some work on purpose and with our dear friend and colleague Haley Rushing on this, but talk to us about your first steps with Rally Day as we try to hone that sense of purpose for you so you can scale your mom's sense of purpose to a greater degree. Like, to walk us through that, because I think it tells a lot about like what you've been up to in the first couple few months since we
Yeah.
became partners in July.
I'm just pulling it up now, but even before I jump into the purpose, I just want to highlight on one thing you just said, Ryan. One of the largest companies across America that has 80% market share in exactly what you're saying is called The Place for Mom. And many companies who go that route, who unfortunately is how you probably found your caregivers, got 55 calls. It's really sad because if you don't provide a good job or do something wrong, and most of your leads come from online digital ads like A Place for Mom, you can provide good, bad, any type of care, and your lead generation never changes. Our model at Elder Care, which is exactly that, was sitting in waiting rooms and educating social workers. And if I didn't do a good job, that social worker is going to hear about it. And therefore, our model is always exactly to your point, is educating people of what the amazing services we can do, rather than, hey, there's this whole other market that's super successful. Many businesses do really well, like you said, the capitalistic senior care society of lead generation is just a whole different model, and why many companies struggle scaling, because they can do bad quality, not care, not be, want to be there for your
There's
family.
just no feedback loop that's meaningful.
Exactly. And again, no fault of their own. That's the business model many have gone. But with ours, that's exactly right, of how we had that feedback loop that you had to succeed. If our only, this is something when we met with you guys from our digital advertising, we didn't do any. Ours is completely lead generation. For us is a sales model of in hospitals with doctors and with their patients. And if we don't do well, that's the end of that relationship with that hospital. So that's allowed us, it shows how well we've done that. But that's why our model is slightly different. But it brought us to exactly that point of this amazing work I think we've done with you guys, is our business model is unique, and our services are really there for the family themselves, and for the patient, or we don't even call them, we say they're our client. How do we service them? And I think how to articulate it well, we struggled on how to make that a mission or a purpose statement. And you guys have been fantastic coming in, and Haley was amazing. And we brought in our entire team. You guys had a, for those who aren't aware, They have an entire purpose session, part of the wrap program, and it was really special to me. Going into it, I can say honestly, I didn't know what to expect. I looked at it as just an awesome opportunity to spend time with Rallyday and my team. We don't do it enough, and I was like, this is great. We'll have lunch and we'll do this working
Kind of a
session.
kumbaya.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kumbaya, and like
Yeah.
great, like this is cool. I was at GE. We did a lot of drink the Kool-Aid stuff. Sure, let's go drink the Kool-Aid. But actually, the session was awesome. I think Haley does a fantastic job of articulating a number of views within the company and taking, and I always respect people who can take complex issues or opinions and distill it into a concrete idea. And that's what we did. And the session was amazing. I think the teams that was there, I think we had almost 10 people walk out of the session like, oh my God, I'm so bought in. And I'll read it now because it really means a lot. The purpose statement that we came up with was, and I'll go through where Haley and the team really came up with how we decided this was: together we elevate care to meet the moment and deliver peace of mind. And when I read that first statement, I don't think senior care in and of itself, and I wonder, if I were somebody on the outskirts of the streets, I'd be like, what are you talking about? And then when everything you said, Ryan, during this entire discussion so far, it like fits perfectly into the statement. And the way we thought about it was the first word is together. And people might say, like, what does that mean? And I think anybody who ever talks about care for their family is it takes a village. It's not just the children, it's not just the doctor, it's not just this person. So together we all have to work together. And that first word meant a lot to us. And then the second part was to elevate care. Obviously, we want to bring care to the next level for everybody to provide the highest quality. The third aspect was to meet the moment. And many people might say, like, what does that mean? What moment are you? You're not a rock band. Like, you're not going to stand on stage and start playing out. And to us was every single moment that care is needed or in everybody's life is just as important. And when I think of meeting the moment, and our team thinks of meeting the moment, is to us or to a doctor or to somebody else in the field, they might think, you're not having a heart attack. It's not a big deal. I'll get to you later. But in home health care, when it's our client and it's concierge care, someone calls with any complaint, you have to meet that moment and take a moment to take care of that situation. To you or to anybody, it might not be a serious crisis, but to that person, it is. Seniors have many of these throughout the day and a lot of challenges, and they're lonely and it's difficult. And as a senior care provider, you're not just taking care of the clinical side, you're on the emotional side too. And this goes back to the model of elder care that we talked about. My mother is a nurse, but also the social work. And we never want to lose sight of we're not just a clinical provider, we're a psychosocial provider too. That caregiver might be part of the family. There's family dynamics, there's patient dynamics. They could have a good day, a bad day. So that was the third part. And then the final is to deliver peace of mind. And to me, this is the most important aspect. And Ryan, you kind of talked about it before, is this is a family situation. It's a loved one, either a child taking care of the parent, a grandchild taking care of a grandparent, a wife taking care of a husband. And it's such a scary moment, when the tables have turned for a child to take care of their parent or their wife or significant other has to take care of a loved one. You want to know they're in the best possible hands and that you guys are in it together, and they will be here whenever you need it. And that peace of mind means so much to people. We all have busy lives, you have a million things going on. And if you're worried at every second of the day, it's very challenging. And delivering that is what I'm most proud of for families.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, when you all got done with that work, I was here in Denver, and my partners and teammates in sequence called me that night and said, we had like, I don't want to overstate it, but I mean, it was sort of like we had a magical day and a half with David and his team. And all of them talked about this meeting the moment thing. And for me, I know there's the four parts, and I think peace of mind is ultimately what you all provide families and loved ones. But like meeting the moment to me means so many things depending upon who you are in this phase of life. For the, say, son or daughter or husband or wife who has a moment where they kind of say, I can't do this anymore. That is a very hard moment in life where you have to submit yourself to someone else, and it feels kind of rotten, you know. And so there's that moment. And then I'm thinking about, let's just say at 2 in the morning, let's say one of your team members is on site with a patient. That patient or client, they may be asleep for 6 hours while that caregiver is on staff for 8. And that middle of the night shift for any human being is isolating and lonely. And that caregiver could fall asleep. They could start focusing on themselves and get in their head and just lose focus. When the delivery of care over an 8-hour period might be one simple moment of helping them get out of bed and to the bathroom and back, not just safely, but with that touch of someone who really cares for them. In which case, they go back to sleep with that peace of mind for them that is created in this very small moment of time. And you think about that for 30, 60, 90, 120 days, that one moment of touch through the hand on someone's shoulder saying, "You've got this, and I've got you," can mean the difference between someone living for a long time and feeling cared for versus, feeling maybe like an inmate of their own life. And if we could wish anything for our loved ones, it would be like that dignity of care at that standard of meeting the moment, whatever that is. I think your opportunity to like activate this purpose statement externally, great. But I think for all of our employees, feeling a sense of calling for that moment, which is like 3 minutes of 8 hours, there's some legs to that. There's something that we can change the industry. I feel it.
I agree, and you articulate that so well. I thank God you weren't there that day because you you would have done so much better than we were. But just to set the stage, and Ryan, you know this for everybody listening, the RAP program and that 8-hour session of doing this purpose work is about an 8-hour session, and it culminates within the last 20 minutes. And I think Samantha and Haley set the room where they kind of distill, as I said, these concepts into 3 topics. And they give it to our team to then say, okay, everyone on the team, go to which one you resonate the most with. And I look back at Frank, one of the managing partners at Rallyday, and he came up to me afterwards. We were evenly dispersed through all 3. And then everyone's commentary was pretty aggressive that they were gung ho that theirs was the smartest and best. And Frank afterwards came up to me, and even I said the same. I was like, I was pretty nervous this was going to go really badly. Like this is why I didn't think this mushy stuff is good. We're going to walk away from this is going to be terrible, and we're all going to come away being like, I thought I was right and you were wrong. And to watch how, and that's where I think the Rallyday team came out of it saying it was magical. Watching us all come together to this moment to get this purpose statement that I think hits on everything that we really wanted to was awesome to see. Now looking back, in the moment you don't see it happening until as you get there, you're like, oh my God, this journey was the best part. But I doubted it at first. Frank even said he's like, I was nervous. He was like, this is my first time doing this, and I was like, this is gonna be the last.
It is. It
And
is.
it was
I
awesome.
totally agree. Like, strategy, it's like, fine, we're going to go from X to Y. And we're kind of programmed that there's going to be a little sausage making in that, but it's within some guardrails of reason. You throw purpose on the table with 10 people, and it's like, what is the purpose of our organization? It takes a very powerfully gifted facilitator to take 8 hours of work, get to that last 20 minutes, and almost unveil it for everyone at the same time with their contributions and the contributions of other stakeholders. Yeah, somehow it works. I have no idea how it works,
I
but
still don't know how we got here. It's like magic. It's like the genie, and he,
yeah.
bends down, and like it popped out, and it was awesome to see. And that's what, like you said, like we have nurses, social workers, COOs, like operations people, we had HR people, like everyone's such different perspectives. So how Haley like pulls it all out of us and puts it together, it's awesome.
Well, and it's not, I'm going to say this not as an advertisement, but when David references RAP, what that stands for is a Rallyday Accelerator Program. And it was our attempt to create some programming around the first 6 months that we were with a new partner and an investment to give a sense of halftime to the founder and his or her team, where you could kind of look in the first, in your case, 8 years and say, what did we learn? And if it's a football team, it's like, what adjustments do we need to make for the second half? And just taking stock of all that in a meaningful way that would somehow inform an even better second half when we're together. The A accelerator is not necessarily to accelerate growth, it's to accelerate trust. And we find that going through this, difficult day together, David and all of his people, it just creates this alignment and sense of trust that you can't create otherwise. And the way that we program this out is we start with purpose, and then David is here in Denver for a couple days, then working on a strategy that will be in maximum service to the purpose. And then he's going to take a step back and say, okay, culturally, we've kind of gotten to where we are with your heart, David, and the heart of your mom, and some of what Todd and Eric have brought to the table. But if the purpose and the strategy is, let's just say impact wise, 5x where you are today, then it says to all of us, like, well, then the culture needs to get 5 times as good to keep up. And that's hard to do. I mean, we all say, like, companies get bigger, their cultures get, worse. And so fighting that physics is how David will more or less complete the wrap process. But it's kind of funny. David was coming here today, and he sent me a text last night. And he goes, "Hey, we should hang out." And I said, "That's a great idea." And then what happened?
The classic case of a private equity partner, right? I was coming in. This is my second or third time in Denver, which has all been awesome. And fortunately, they've been gracious hosts. But I thought I actually hadn't seen Ryan since we closed. So I texted him saying, "Hey, let's grab coffee or catch up." And he's like, "That sounds great. Let's do the podcast." And I was like, "Oh, okay, great." Like my first time ever on a podcast, and our coffee chat's out the window, but let's go for it.
Well, that's the authenticity of the podcast, right? I mean, you and I could be doing that.
But then you also threw me in. I said the last person on this podcast was Ed Norton. So you double hit me hard as no preparation. And after that, like, just throw me to the wolves. And I was like, this is, they always do this to the New Yorkers. The New Yorker comes in, throws to the fire.
Well, that's actually a perfect segue, because I'd like to sort of end the podcast a little bit about you, David. And obviously, when you're the private equity firm and you're trying to figure out, where do we invest our capital, where do we invest our time, where do we want to spend the next 5 or 7 years creating value for everybody. And part of that's the industry, and obviously elder care serves an industry that is underserved. And the second one is like a business model, a way of doing things that is somehow different. I mean, elder care checks that box, with a bold Sharpie. And the third one is what we call the monster, the leader who's on a mission to do something, extraordinary. And it's hard to tell, like when we met David first time, it was like investment banking and a sponsored meeting at a big table, and everybody had suits on and all that stuff. And it's hard to tell. I remember after we first met in New York, I was on spring break with my family, and I said to my family, "I need to go make an important phone call." And they're like, "Oh, Dad, that's a buzzkill." And I said, "No, this is important." And I called you on your cell, 914 area code, and I shared with you. I said, "We want to be your partner." And I think you were like, "Yeah, man, I know. I get it." And I said, "No, I really want to be your partner. We really want to be your partner." And you're like, "No, I get it, man." And I said, "Well, would you come to Denver? Would you make the step of leaving New York, come to Denver, meet the whole Rallyday team? Because I want you to feel, David, as much you buying Rallyday as Rallyday buying into your vision." And you said yes. Like you didn't even, I think our phone call was like 6 minutes. And you were like, "Yeah, I'm in. Let's do it." And then I said, "Would you bring your wife?" And you're like, "Well, I could tell you're a little hedgy." And then I find out your wife was pregnant, and there's a whole side story there. But I only bring that up because our hunch was that you're a really special leader. And before this podcast, I asked the team, describe David as a leader now that we've been, together for a few months here. And I just want to read this to you. It says, one quote was, "David is one of the most grounded competitors I've ever met. He's deeply driven to win, but he does it with grace and humility." Another one said, "David listens to everyone in the room. He gets his hands dirty in the soil and genuinely sees people. What's impressive is that he leads this way and delivers results. He proves that you can be both ambitious and deeply human at the same time." Another one said, "You're relentless You have a lack of ego. You have extraordinary self-awareness. You're committed to winning and lifting others along the way. You're a talent magnet. You're able to attract the best and retain the best, be the best, develop the best, and become the best. And you're a visionary. And then one said, all I need to say is, who else in the world would leave investment banking to join his mom to start a senior healthcare business? So, I mean, this is what your new partners are saying about you. And you can't see David, he's turning a little red now. The question I want to ask is, where do all those qualities come from? I mean, did you have, role models? Obviously, you had your mom and your dad. But I mean, when I read those list of qualities in you, I mean, it makes me even turn red. Like the strength inside of you at a relatively young age. I mean, what do you attribute all that to, David?
I appreciate that question, and I'm grateful, humbled, embarrassed by how nice those statements are, and the Rallyday team's awesome. Like hearing that from them means a lot. But most of all, I think the question's really valid, and it's a challenging one to answer. And the answer I've given to many people when they ask about the business and other things, there's no silver bullet, right? There's not one moment you could ever point to. And the one fortunate thing I can say in my life that I've been driven to do and lucky to do from an early stage was gain a variety of experiences in exposing myself to every situation that's possible. And this began at an early stage. When I was growing up, I was a competitive golfer. And from a good or bad way, golf is a very individualized sport. You either win or lose on your own. You have coaches and other things. But when you're on the golf course, you're solo. And I think it's similar in skiing too, right? You're very reliant on yourself. So you have to have an internal drive to win by yourself, not to appease your teammates or to get up in the morning and say, I'm at least going to see my friends and party with them afterwards. Like there's no party. You go back to your hotel room afterwards by yourself with your dad or your mom. So I think doing that, but also at an early stage, my family and my father in particular was very big on shipping me off to like a camp or whatever. I was generally the youngest playing golf with a lot of older competitive athletes in the sport. And I think at one point every summer there was a guy from Australia who would come, and it was a 2-week camp where we would go in his van and for 3 weeks just travel to every golf course with 2 other guys who were 5 years older than me and just experience that type of nature where you had to evolve and get through that. And that's just the first stage. I think more importantly, I was just so open after those experiences that when I left undergrad, most of my friends, almost every single one, moved back to New York for their job. I saw a vision for the future that I wanted to try various experiences, and GE Healthcare, I believed at the time, would provide it. So I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I lived in Wauwatosa and then Waukesha. And then I believed that would give me the stepping stones to then work anywhere in the world for GE. And I think the experiences at GE of training me and the management training, that team atmosphere of fierce loyalty to the people you work with, the leaders I worked under was exceptional. Still to this day, I've been catching up with my old mentor, Ian Graham, who was the CFO of GE Healthcare's CT business at the time. And I look back, and that was an amazing experience for the management. Then moving to Chicago, they sent me to Brazil. I lived there for some time, and the experience of international, of work with them as the sole American in the business that they sent down there. So again, just thrown to the wolves, and it was the best. It was the best experience. And then it goes back to then going back to business school and joining Morgan Stanley. And every one of those experiences, I think, taught me something new and made me open to doing new things. And I think fear is probably is a great asset sometimes, but it's also super paralyzing. And because I didn't have the fear to try new things, I think GE taught me my first career path was they switched jobs and switched positions every 6 months. And their goal was for you to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think as an entrepreneur, that's like the perfect iteration of like life, except it's not every 6 months, it's probably every day you're uncomfortable. And every day you have a success, you probably have something that goes wrong. And I think all the nice things that were said about me, every step added value. The things that went wrong and that I look back in the moment, I have days that I might have been crying during my founder's journey in the first year. I can't tell you how difficult that was. I think anybody who's a founder and it's all, roses and daisies is lying. Like it was really hard.
Weeds and dirt is a
Weeds and dirt, and it's emotional, it's a grind, and nobody understands that unless you've done it. GE days when I was living by myself and every friend's off doing something, it's the same thing. And I think looking back in those emotional times, like I wouldn't trade any of it for the world. Someone asked me like, what would you have changed with the journey? I think even Ron, you might have asked me when at one of the dinners, and I was like, I don't know what I would change because otherwise I wouldn't be here today. And I think each one of those has its value, whether it's the finance experience in investment banking, whether it's my, someone would say at your MBA, did you learn so much about business? And I'm like, I learned relationships, networking, business. I don't know which one is coming into play, but they all do. And on a different day of the week, it comes in. So I think I attribute all the success that we've had to every person along the way. And that's where you guys have been invaluable. It's been 60 days now. I don't know, 65 days. Like it's crazy. I feel like it's been 3 years. Like the Rallyday team is awesome to the fact that like I feel like I've known you guys forever. And I think that's how important you guys are already on to this part of the journey. So all of it's been great.
Yeah, that leaning into discomfort. It seems like there's a common trait in most really successful people is that they've lived fiercely on the edge of discomfort like their entire life, and it just sort of compounds. And there's this quote I read that said something like, interesting things happen to people who do interesting things. And it's just like way the universe pays us back for that discomfort. But at the time it just feels like weeds and dirt. And only later on inspection can you say, oh yeah, like going to Milwaukee, like that was a thing, like not going into investment banking and doing the, blue chip healthcare program at GE, like that wasn't very glamorous and sexy, but like was very formative in terms of who I became. And I also love how you basically say like all those compliments that the team shared about you are actually compliments to the people who leaned into your development. I mean, that's basically what you just said, and that's a great way to think about life. One of the things we look for is leaders who are aggressively humble, and we all know plenty of aggressive people who aren't humble. We also know people like my mom, who's very humble, who's not very aggressive at all, and it's rare to see someone with both these qualities. And when I boil down your, kind of gifts that I see looking from the outside in, it's that David Gilberg is on a mission to transform an entire industry, and he will not quit until that is complete. The second thing is that I've never met someone who is at once as humble as they are aggressive. And I just can't tell you how honored I am personally and on behalf of our firm that we get to be part of your life. And I hope that, in 5 years or whatever, you look back on this chapter of your life and it's like the most meaningful chapter, like chapter 5 in the book that you were articulating earlier. We take that really seriously. And yeah, we're 65 days in, but might as well be 3 years in. And I think what can we accomplish in 3 years if you look at what we've already accomplished in 65 days, like it's there. I guess I would just leave with just a massive amount of gratitude, David. I want to thank your wife, the family that you're building. I hope we can contribute to your goals with your family, and I'm just super grateful. So I guess we can, leave it at that.
I appreciate it. I'll say one thing that since I want to thank you guys for making not only this experience as great as it's been thus far, but a funny story is when you met Maggie during that dinner, and I think at the point, and I was explaining to her how important this decision was, and for anybody who's going to go through this process, when you meet with all these private equity firms, they all blend together very quickly. You spend 5 hours of presenting to each, and they're all great in their own regard, but it's hard.
Just ask them.
Yes. And so it's one of those things that when I explained to her, I was like, it's such an important decision. But something you said earlier was it's a marriage. So I said to her, it's like a marriage, almost more important because I spend 10, 12 hours a day working. And this is who you're working with. And she did not appreciate the comment that it was almost as important as marriage. I was like, no, it's in a different way, I swear. But since joining and partnering with you guys, I can say it has not only met my expectations of what I was hoping, how different it would be, but it's exceeded it in a number of regards. And that's where I think, to your point, I'm generally very relentless in my vision and my goals, and seeing you guys support those goals has been exceptional. And at no point have I felt it's been a hindrance or in a way that I spent at Morgan Stanley dealing with private equity. Has it felt like that, which has been the craziest part because I knew what to expect. I've done it before. Very few founders have been on the other side and dealt with private equity. So I kind of, even if it was not the way how it is right now, I would have said, I knew what I was getting myself into. I've done this. It has not been that way. So, thank you to you, Ryan, for our first meeting and being so exceptional, and Rallyday being exceptional.
Thank you. And I think the purpose statement applies to us too. Like, we want to meet the moment. And as we conclude here today, I would just, if you had a beer and I had a beer, we'd say, like, let's give a toast to cherishing every moment together. I think this is going to be a really formative time for this industry that we serve, and the work that we're doing is way more important than an investment, including a relationship that we get to enjoy with you and your family, and kind of adding to the lives of your employees and every step of the way. So thank you for giving us this moment with you, and maybe we'll redo this in a year and talk about the progress that we've made. It could be kind of fun, but thank you again, David. Thank you for being in Denver. Thanks for having this moment with me. And I'll look forward to more in the future.